All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm Thomas, and this is an educational channel. I focus on, I guess it's, theories of everything, comparative theories of everything. I'd like to um, look at people, especially people you've never heard of, who um, spent their whole life working on their great theory and put out something that they backed up they made it worth their while. They maybe didn't get everything right, but you know, they spent their life um, productively and came up with something that is worthy of other people's time. And many of these theories have been ignored or ridiculed by the scientific establishment. Now, what we're looking at today is the 145th video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory, which is a theory of everything that was derived by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. The basic idea is that we live not in a universe of matter and not in a universe of energy, but in a universe of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. So space and time really don't exist other than together in motion. And the specific kind of motion Larson is talking about is scalar motion, a motion that has a magnitude but has no direction, which you can visualize if you take a balloon and a magic marker and you put a bunch of dots on the balloon. You blow up the balloon, all of the dots are moving away from each other. You suck in the balloon, all the dots are moving toward each other, but in no particular direction or really in all directions. That's a scalar motion, and that's what he uses to build his theoretical universe out of, which he then compares with the actual universe that the scientists have measured and observed. Now, in my work, I do have a complaint about what Larson says, though, because he says that he's got the right answers, and the fact that he has the right answers means that nobody else has the right answers. He doesn't say that per se, but that's kind of what I get out of what he said earlier in this book here. We're looking at his book called Nothing But Motion that came out in 1979. And, the way I look at it is that really all of these different theories of everything that I'm studying are all pointing to the same reality. It's kind of like I believe it's an Indian myth, um, uh, from India, um, about the elephant, where the blind men are looking at the elephant, not looking, but feeling the elephant, and they feel like 6 or 7 different things: the trunk and the tusks and the legs and the tail, and they all say that the elephant is a different thing. Well, it's not quite like that, but it's like um, I was just looking, for example, at this book called Laws of Form by G. Spencer Brown that came out in the late 1960s. And, his findings are very compatible with Larson's. And but they're coming at it from different points of view. He's coming at it from more of a mathematical point of view. Larson's coming at it from kind of more of a theoretical point of view. Buckminster Fuller is coming at it from a more geometrical view. The Tree of Life is coming at it from more of a spiritual view. But they're all kind of pointing to the same kind of a reality. And I think that a lot of those theories can be reconciled. So that's what I'm kind of working on, is a reconciliation of some of my heroes. Okay, we're going to take over kind of in the middle of this paragraph here on chapter 4, beginning of chapter 4, which is called Radiation, in this book, Nothing But Motion. And he's going to start talking about scalar motion a little bit here, and then he'll get into some other stuff. Our finding is that the basic physical entities are scalar motions, and that the existence of different observable entities and phenomena is due to the fact that these motions necessarily assume specific directions when they appear in the context of a three-dimensional frame of reference. Inasmuch as the directions are determined by chance, there is a finite probability corresponding to every possible direction, and thus every possibility becomes an actuality. It should be noted that this is exactly the same principle that was applied in Chapter 3 to explain why an expanding sphere of radiation emanates from each radiation source. In this case, too, scalar motions exist, each of which takes one of certain permissible directions, and these motions are distributed over all of the directions. Inasmuch as it has been postulated that motion, as defined earlier, is the sole constituent of the physical universe, we are committed to the proposition that every physical entity or phenomenon is a manifestation of motion. The determination of what entities, phenomena, and processes can exist in the theoretical universe therefore reduces to a matter of ascertaining what kinds of motion and combinations of motion can exist in such a universe, and what changes can take place in these motions. Similarly, in relating the theoretical universe to the observed physical universe, the question as to what any observed entity or phenomena is never arises. We always know what it is. It is a motion, a combination of motions, or a relation between motions. The only question that is ever at issue is what kinds of motions are involved. There has been a sharp difference of opinion among those interested in the philosophical aspects of science as to whether the process of enlarging scientific understanding is discovery or invention. This is related to the question as to the origin of the fundamental principles of science that was discussed in Chapter 1, but it is a broader issue that applies to all scientific knowledge and involves the inherent nature of that knowledge. The specific point at issue is clearly stated by Lindsay in these words, quote, "Application of the term discovery implies that there is an external world out there, wholly independent of the observer and with built-in regularities and laws waiting to be uncovered and revealed. They have always been there and presumably always will be. Our task is by diligent search to find out what they are." On the other hand, the term invention implies that the physicist uses not only his observation, but his imaginative powers to construct points of view that identify with experience. End quote. The discovery concept, says Lindsay, implies that the acquisition of scientific knowledge is cumulative and that ultimately our understanding of the physical world should be essentially complete. On the contrary, the point of view invention means that the process of creating new experience and the construction of new ideas to cope with this experience go hand in hand. On this basis, the whole activity is open-ended. There is no place for the idea of completeness. The reciprocal system now provides a definitive answer to this question. It not only establishes scientific investigation as a process of discovery, but reduces that discovery to deduction and verification of the deductions. All of the information that is necessary in order to arrive at a full description of any theoretically possible entity or phenomena is implicit in the postulates. A full development of the consequences of the postulates therefore define a complete theoretical universe. As will be seen in the pages that follow, the physical processes of the universe include a continuing series of interchanges between vectorial motions and scalar motions. In all of these interchanges, causality is maintained. No motions of either type occur except as a result of previously existing motions. The concept of events occurring without cause, which enters into some of the interpretations of the theories included in the current structure of physics, is therefore foreign to the reciprocal system. But the universe of motion is not deterministic in the strict Laplacian sense, because the directions of the motions are continually being redetermined by chance processes. The description of the physical universe that emerges from the development of the consequences of the postulates of the reciprocal system therefore identifies the general classes of entities and phenomena that exist in the universe and the relations between them, rather than specifying the exact result at every interaction, as a similarly complete theory would do if it were deterministic. In beginning our examination of these physical entities and phenomena, the first point to be noted is that the postulates require the existence of real units of motion, units that are similar to the units of motion involved in the progression of the natural reference system, except that they actually exist rather than being fictitious results of relating motion to an arbitrary reference system. These independent units of motion, as we will call them, are superimposed on the moving reference background in much the same manner as that in which matter is supposed to exist in the basic space of previous physical theory. Since they are units of the same kind, however, these independent units are interrelated with the units of the background motion, rather than being separate and distinct from it, in the manner in which matter is presumed to be distinct from the space-time background in the theories based on the matter concept. As we will see shortly, some of the independent motions have components that are consistent with the background motion, and these components are not effective from the physical standpoint. That is, their effective physical magnitude is zero. A point of considerable significance is that while the postulates permit the existence of these independent motions, and on the basis of the principle previously stated, they must therefore exist in the universe of motion defined by the postulates. Those postulates do not provide any mechanism for originating independent motions. It follows that the independent motions now existing either originated coincidentally with the universe itself or were originated subsequently by some outside agency. Likewise, the postulates provide no mechanism for terminating the existence of these independent motions. Consequently, the number of effective units of such motion now existing can neither be increased nor diminished by any process within the physical system. This inability to alter the existing number of effective units of independent motion is the basis for what we may call the general conservation law. And the various subsidiary conservation laws applying to specific physical phenomena. It suggests, but does not necessarily require, a limitation of the independent units of motion to a finite number. The issue as to the finiteness of the universe does not enter into any of the phenomena that will be examined in this present volume, but it will come up in connection with some of the subjects that will be taken up later, and it will be given further consideration then. The reciprocal system of theory deals only with the physical universe as it now exists and reaches no conclusions as to how that universe came into being, nor as to its ultimate fate. The theoretical system is therefore completely neutral on the question of creation. It is compatible with either the hypothesis of creation by some agency or the hypothesis that the universe has always existed. Continuous creation of matter by action of the physical mechanism itself, as postulated by the steady state theory of cosmology, is ruled out. And there is nothing in that mechanism that will allow the universe to arrive at any kind of termination of its own accord. The question of creation or termination by action of an outside agency is beyond the scope of the theoretical development. Turning now to the question as to what kinds of motion are possible at the basic level, we note that scalar magnitudes may be either positive, outward, or negative, inward. But as we observe motion in the context of a fixed reference system, the outward progression of the natural reference system is always present, and thus every motion includes a one-unit outward component. The discrete unit postulate prevents any addition to an effective unit, and independent outward motion is therefore impossible. All dependent motion must have net inward or negative magnitude. Furthermore, it must be continuous and uniform at this stage of the development, because no mechanism is yet available whereby discontinuity or variability can be produced. Since the outward progression always exists, independent, continuous negative motion is not possible by itself, but it can exist in combination with the ever-present outward progression. The result of such a combination of unit negative and unit positive motion is zero motion relative to a stationary coordinate system. Another possibility is simple harmonic motion, in which the scalar direction of movement reverses at each end of a unit of space or time. In such motion, each unit of space is associated with a unit of time. And in unidirectional translational motion, as in unidirectional translational motion, but in the context of a stationary three-dimensional spatial reference system, the motion oscillates back and forth over a single unit of space or time for a certain period of time or space. At first glance, it might appear that the reversals of scalar direction at each end of the basic unit are inadmissible in view of the absence of any mechanism for accomplishing a reversal. However, the changes of scalar direction in simple harmonic motion are actually continuous and uniform, as can be seen from the fact that such motion is a projection of a circular motion on a diameter. The net effective speed varies continuously and uniformly from +1 at the midpoint of the forward movement to 0 at the positive end of the path of motion, and then to -1 at the midpoint of the reverse movement, and 0 at the negative end of the path. The continuity and uniformity requirements are both met by a continuous, uniform change of direction and by a continuous, uniform change of magnitude. As pointed out earlier, The theoretical structure that we are developing from the fundamental postulates is a description of what can exist in the theoretical universe defined by those postulates. The question as to whether a certain feature of this theoretical universe does or does not correspond to anything in the actual physical universe is a separate issue that is explored in a subsequent step in the project to be started shortly, in which the theoretical universe is compared item by item with the observed universe. At the moment, therefore, we are not concerned with whether or not simple harmonic motion does exist in the actual physical universe, why it exists if it does, or how it manifests itself. All that we need to know for present purposes is that inasmuch as this kind of motion is continuous and is not excluded by the postulates, it is one of the kinds of motion that exists in the theoretical universe of motion under the most basic conditions. Under these conditions, simple harmonic motion is confined to individual units. When the motion has progressed for one full unit, the discrete unit postulate specifies that a boundary exists. There is no discontinuity, but at this boundary, one unit terminates and another begins. Whatever processes may have been underway in the first unit cannot carry over into the next. They cannot be divided between two totally independent units. Consequently, a continuous change from positive to negative can occur only within one unit of either space or time. Okay, we're going to stop there. We'll take over tomorrow here in the middle of chapter 4. There's a lot to say about this, but it's too much to say about this, so I'm going to let Larson speak for himself for a little while anyway. But these are controversial points even within the reciprocal system of theory. Other people have come up with other ideas about this. Okay, we'll take it over tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.